Hi. So in this presentation, we're going to be talking about the first of the modules. So we've talked about the modules of grammar, phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics. Now we're going to get a little deeper into each one, and this time we're going to focus on phonology. And as we talk about, phonology is the study of speech sounds, the structure, how it's organized, and this is the key idea, is that language is ordered structurally. There's always going to be this system to it, and there's a system to the sounds of the language, how they combine together, how each sound relates to other sounds in the language, and that's what we try to focus on. I'm just going to give you a quick hint of that. So let me get rid of that circle, and then I'm going to go on to the next slide. And what I want you to do now is I want you to say the word tits. I'm serious. I really want you to say it. I want you to find a quiet place, somewhere where you're not going to disturb other people, where you can actually say the word aloud. It doesn't have to be loud, but you do have to actually say it, have it come out. And I'm going to show you what I want you to do. I want you to take a piece of paper, and it doesn't matter. I'm going to use a magazine here so I can get a nice red piece of paper. And I just want you to tear off a strip of paper, like so. And then I want you to hold it up in front of your mouth, and I want you to say the word tits. Tits. So did you see how that happened? Tits. The paper flaps when I say it. And I'll try to give you a little angle here. Tits. Tits. All right, so you see how it flaps. And so what I mean is the paper goes down like this and then comes back up. So there's something in there that's causing this flapping. And we can actually identify what that is, because now I want you to say it's. So again, hold the paper up in front of your mouth. It's. 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 And now you see that if I put a T on it, tits, 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 you get some serious flapping. But as soon as I lop that T off, tits versus it's, tits, it's. There's no flapping. And so it's got to be that first T. But what's interesting about it is why that T? There's two T's in the word tits. Right? There's a T right here, and there's a T right here. So why is it that the second T doesn't cause the paper to flap, but the first T does? Well, we can investigate a little bit further. Let's try saying another word. Take that S off the end, and now say it. 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 Now, actually, you get a little bit of flapping with that one. Not nearly as much as you would if you were to say tit. Tit. But you do get some flapping when you say it, it. So what we find is that there is a difference between it's and it, that T changes when there's no S behind it. Now I want you to try this word here, where now we're going to take the S from the end of tits and put it on the beginning and see if that changes anything. Stit, stit, stit. Stit, 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 tits, stit, tits, stit. So what you see is that now this one here, this T here, that follows an S, gets pronounced differently. And that's the key, right? Is that at the beginning, when we first started, we've got the word tits. And if I had asked you how many T's are in that word, you would have obviously said 2. And I would guess that you probably thought of them as being the same sound, that this sound and this sound are the same because they're both T. And there is something right about that in our minds. They're both T. They both have that same ideal sound. But what happens is that when we actually pronounce it, we follow certain rules for pronunciation, depending on where in a word we find the sound. And so when it's at the beginning of the word, as in tits, then you get this burst of air, and that's what causes the paper to flap. When it's in the middle of the word, like this, or at the end of the word, like this, then you don't get that same burst of air after. You get a slight burst of air here. And you get really no burst of air here at all. And so it seems that it's the position that really matters of whether you get that burst of air or not. If it comes at the beginning of the word, you get the burst of air. If it doesn't come at the beginning of the word, you don't get the burst of air. Kind of a simple rule, but an important one. Now that's actually turns out to be a slight simplification, that if you were to go on and study phonology, you would realize that there's actually a little bit more to the rule than that. But again, the key is that in our minds, it's the same sound, but it's not in reality. In reality, in the physical sense of the word, of the sounds, they're different to the degree that in some languages, like say Hindi, that burst of air after a T can be used to produce a completely different word. So with the burst of air after a T, like in tits, then it would be one word, but you can also pronounce that T as tits, and in that case there's no burst of air, and that would in Hindi be a different word completely. So what we see is that each language is going to have rules for how sounds combine together. Now, a little bit later in the semester, we're going to be looking at this orderly way that sounds get shaped and get put together. We're going to be looking specifically at syllable structure. And what we're going to be looking at is what swearing can tell us about syllable structure. That actually, it can be kind of difficult to get at syllable structure and how it works and how words get composed of these smaller sounds, but swearing actually can give us a little bit of information on that and a particular phenomenon within swearing. So we're going to be looking at that as a little teaser now. A little later in the semester we'll be looking at that in more depth.